Thompson.
You're both with the Meadow Center for Water and the Environment at Texas State University.
And this is Fahrenheit 140. Hey everyone, welcome to Fahrenheit 140, Meadow Center for Water and the Environment's podcast on climate change and a little bit of Texas news. Happy to see y'all. Robert, how are you?
I'm doing really good. It's pretty hot outside. It's supposed to be a high of 104 today.
It's a living laboratory for climate change. We get to feel it all over.
Yes. Hopefully our power will stay on during this recording.
That would be nice. Can't take that for granted anymore. But
Can't take that for granted, no.
We can take the heat for granted. I think it's here to stay.
Yep. We seem to be getting more and more of it. Speaking of hot, a little later in this show, or hot topics, a little later in the show, we've got Dr. Tom Ptak from Texas State University to talk about an article that he wrote for the conversation about what an average citizen can do with respect to climate change. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too. I loved that article. I always get a little overwhelmed by all the bad news. So it was great to see some concrete things that I could do.
Yeah. And I love his positivity, I guess. And
Absolutely.
there's like big things that have to happen, but each of us has a place in those big things.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I'd love to hear what you learned this month reading through the news.
There's always so much, so it's so hard to pick stuff out. But one that caught my eye was an article in the Chicago Tribune. And, if y'all go back to where you access this iPod, there's links to these articles we talk about. But article in the Chicago Tribune about armadillos invading Illinois. And the article's kind of humorous. Here's one of my favorite lines is, in many cases, the response to a live armadillo in Illinois has been confusion. Just what in the long-snouted, armor-shelled hell am I looking at here? So, and of course, I was born in Chicago and grew up in northwestern Illinois, and apparently there's been 2 confirmed sightings of armadillos in Cook County, which is where Chicago is. So I also took interest in this, given that my hometown is back there, and locals apparently now are calling them possums on the half shell.
And what's invading?
They're so due to climate change, due to the warming climate, and unlike much of Texas, where it seems like we're getting drier, they're getting wetter in Illinois, and so that's also helpful for the armadillos. And so they are marching northward. Apparently, Carbondale in southern Illinois is Armadillo Central. In Illinois, and so they're expecting them to continue marching north.
Well, fun fact: armadillos carry leprosy. So
the article did talk about that. Yes. Another little interesting little bit I got in there was they're not considered an invasive species because they weren't introduced by people. So I didn't realize that there was that distinction. Because they're kind of doing their own thing, hitchhiking up or.
So they're just moving with the habitat, right?
Yeah, exactly. Along with a lot of other things. So so I found that pretty interesting.
Yeah, that makes me think. I didn't bring the article to talk about, but I saw. They've documented that some birds are hatching their young 3 full weeks early now.
Wow.
That's how, just in our lifetimes, how much things have changed. So it's not just the armadillos. You're going to see a lot of things shifting.
Yep. It's a lot of stuff.
Well, that was an unexpected article. I have another fun fact about armadillos. Do you want to?
Yes, go.
I don't know if it's true, but I've always been told that the reason so many armadillos are on the road is because it's not because they get run over by the tires. They actually, if they would stay still, the car would go over them, but they panic and they leap into the air and they actually get hit by the front of the car.
Oh no.
So they're not adapted. So I hope they're not moving on the highways.
Well, it was noted, similar to around here. I mean, it was a while before I saw a live armadillo when I first moved to
Yeah.
Texas, and so they're noticing up in Illinois. It's like I see a lot of dead ones.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a shame. Hope they figure that out, armadillos. Well, my first article is kind of related to the heat wave we're having, and it's from a good old Aggie, published in the Bloomberg news, I guess, feed. Like there are papers anymore. The author is Eric Roston, and just talking about the title is "The Temperature is the Least Surprising Part of the Texas Heat Wave," and his point is that like these temperatures have been predicted for a long time now. We've known that temperatures are increasing, right? And his point is that this is the new normal, and it's just not even worthy of a headline anymore. And um, you know, this was something that's been predicted and is playing out as predicted. But he goes on to kind of share some more positive aspects of this, and talking about how we're having an energy revolution, and that even though we don't think of it, we are adapting in ways that uh, are actually more cost effective. Like he mentions that in Texas, there are days where we're using wind power as more than 50% of our energy source in Texas.
mm-hmm.
And so there are these shifts that are happening um, that are more noteworthy, I guess, than the temperature. He's saying like that some of our reactions are happening under our nose, and his point is just that like the temperature increases are uncomfortable, right? It's not great, but we're all adapting. And each summer they get a little worse and we adapt. And he's saying that there is going to be a tipping point soon where um, it's just going to cross a threshold to where we can't adapt, like, yeah, 106, you can do 107, you can do 114, 120. Systems start failing, people can't work outside. The products we've used to build our infrastructure fail, like, so his point is sort of a warning that this kind of slow simmer in the pot is going to turn to boil soon. And
Yeah. I was just going to say, it sounds like the proverbial frog in the pot.
yeah, and the argument is sort of like, yeah, climate change is here, can't avoid it. This is already written, this future is written. It's time to start focusing on that adaptation. And his worry is that I'm going to read this. The thing that worries me is much like COVID, a lot of climate change is going to be this exercise in normalizing suffering, just like we do with 1,000 COVID deaths every day. So just kind of, we're all kind of getting used to this daily barrage of bad news and higher temperatures and grids that fail. And so it's time to start focusing on the tools we do have, like wind and solar and other things that kind of move us into a more resilient position.
Yeah, that's a perceptive observation, because I mean, even myself, it's like I'm not going to be outside the next
Right.
week or so. I'm going to minimize being outside the next week or so,
And luckily you have
because
a
it's going to be
job where
so
you
hot.
can do that,
Yes,
right?
yeah,
But
no, you're right.
no.
You see these highway workers or construction workers
Right.
and stuff. That's got to be brutal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you're going to be shocked that I found an article that's about flatulence.
Oh, Robert,
Um,
you never disappoint.
um, there's a whole arc of information on this, but it was all over the news, about New Zealand seeking to tax cow and sheep burps. This comes from downtoearth.org, but these articles have been all over the interwebs. And New Zealand has more cattle and sheep than people. 10 million cattle, 26 million sheep against 5 million people, and nearly half of its emissions is methane coming from agriculture and cow and sheep burps. And I don't know if they're just being polite, because to me burps come out one end and they don't say anything about the other end. So I'm assuming maybe New Zealanders burps are for both. I don't know, but and of course, methane is serious, that we've talked about. It's 28 to 35 times as warming as CO2. And over a 20-year period, it's around 84 times as powerful per unit mass as carbon dioxide. Similar to CO2, we keep seeing increasing levels of methane. Um, there was no information on like how much they're gonna how much of a tax they're going to levy, and how exactly that's going to be, and it wasn't exactly said how. So I don't know if they're going to like put cameras, and every time a cow belches, then
I
you
bet
get
it's like per
charged.
animal. They probably
Yeah, you're probably right. That would probably be easier. But they're also, they're incentivizing feed additives to minimize the burping. So it's kind of like Beano for cows.
yeah.
Um, and so anyways, yeah, I think they're the first country in the world to be doing this.
They are so ahead of everything, I feel like. Let's field trip. Let's field trip and find out.
For that.
Yeah. My next one's kind of like the birds and the armadillos. We are being affected by these changes in temperature, and a study was released through this organization called One Earth, but it's an academic study about the effect of rising temperatures on our sleep quality. And so, we all know kind of we suffer when daylight savings time changes happen. We are kind of attuned to the environment, whether we know it or not. And what they did is kind of monitor Fitbit. I'm using what similar type devices for people all over the world, 68 countries. They tracked 7 million sleep records, and they found that where the temperatures are higher, people are losing hours of sleep, and that the impact is worse, obviously, in hotter climes. So people that live in hotter areas are experiencing more sleep deprivation. And it also says that older people and women experience more impact and less sleep. And this was kind of shocking, but it says they're predicting by the end of the century, it may erode 50 to 58 hours of sleep per person per year. And the current estimates are around 44 hours a week. So that's significant. That's a significant impact.
It is. That's not good.
Not good. That's kind of tying in with all these other not good. Not good temperature issues.
Messing with our sleep now.
Yeah, that's important. So that was interesting. We got another one?
I do have another one, and this one's more directly related to water, but it's also timely in that it's related to wildfire. And it's an article that came out in early June from the Union of Concerned Scientists, called "Water, Wildfire, and Climate Change."
Thompson just then.
And has some interesting statistics in it. There's been a fivefold increase in burned acres, from 2 million burned in 1985 to 10 million in 2020. Pretty much a linear upward swing there. The good news is that can't be maintained indefinitely, because which is the bad news. There's only so much forest that can be burned, but but it's not a good trend. New Mexico has been in the news. I was
Mhm.
just right before we got online to record this, was seeing that the fire in the Gila forest is now just about as big
Yeah.
as the big one that got all the attention up in northeastern New Mexico. So they're having a record year of wildfires. Um, Another interesting piece of information was that western forests are now about 50% drier due to climate change. So with the
Mm,
increased temperatures and decreased precipitation, they just really turned into tinder boxes. The water connection comes in is that when a forest burns and you're reliant on say springs, or you have reservoirs up in the mountains. When a wildfire comes through, it causes a number of water supply issues. So there's debris flows. You no longer have the vegetation holding soils in place, and then also the fact that things have been burned. It affects the water quality. So you see higher nitrates, benzenes, and arsenic. And I toured it was probably about 10 years ago, a reservoir in Oregon that was affected by a wildfire, and all the things that they had to do to restore that water resource, because the trees die and the logs come down during floods and sediment. It really becomes a mess. um, they recommend better forest and fire management techniques, including those inspired by indigenous practices. Trying to limit the severity of wildfires. Although, ironically, the big fire in northeastern New Mexico was caused by a controlled burn that went uncontrolled. So obviously, people need to be more careful.
yeah.
And then they also recommend community investments in heat resistant pipes and better filtering at municipal water treatment plants. Basically, looking ahead, thinking what might happen, and making sure your treatment plants are set up for that. And the heat resistant pipes was interesting because when we had the big fire out in Bastrop, that was one thing that occurred, was with all the PVC pipes, is when they burned, it basically opened up the pipe, and you just had sprinklers all over the whole area that drained out the water supply pipes. So
I'm noticing as you're talking, just even since we've been doing this podcast, how the coverage is really shifting to, okay, this is happening and we need to change how we live. I'm noticing just in the last few months, this sort of shift, and it's really interesting.
yeah, and I saw, if I can slip in a bonus article, I saw an article
Mhm.
about that the emissions we have today, and how slow it takes the natural system or the world to respond to changes, that we've baked in a 1.5 degree Celsius, roughly a 3 degree Fahrenheit increase, average global increase in temperature from what we've done already. Um, and so, whether we like it or not, um, we have to deal with this, and we have to adapt.
Yeah. Well, mine's a little quick one also, just to tie into that. It caught my eye. It was a Yahoo. These kind of articles that pop up in your feed, right, on Facebook or whatever, and it's like the best cities to live in. This one is the worst states to move to when you're retiring because of disasters, like you're talking about with the fires. And so the article's called, "Are You Relocating or Retiring? Know the Risks in the Most Disaster Prone US States." And you want to guess who's number one?
Is it Texas?
It's Texas.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really shocking. And
See, I would have guessed, if I couldn't have read your mind, I would have guessed California. But yeah, why?
Yeah, Texas is at, let's see, the period of record here starts in 1953, and they said the sprawling Lone Star State takes beatings from fires, floods, tornadoes, hail, winter storms, and let's not forget hurricanes. And so 368 disasters since 1953. And so 368, and California was number 2 at 355. So not far behind us. And then Oklahoma was number 3.
Okay, I was going to make a crack about, surely Oklahoma's got to be.
Yeah, so I kind of like, again, a lot of the media is shifting to, all right, people, adjust to the new reality and start thinking about climate impacts before you invest in your retirement, buy a house, think about your sleep.
Yeah, there was a time not too long ago where I kind of felt like maybe this was, the next generation was going to begin experiencing this, but it's here now, and it seems to be moving faster and faster.
Yeah. Did you get any good news?
But we save that for the end. Remember, we end on a high note. So
you're right. You're right. I need it.
You're just so eager. You need it. Well, I do have good news though.
Okay. All right.
Next up, we have Dr. Tom Ptak, who's going to talk about his article in the conversation. So to give you information on what you can do in response to climate change.
Nicely done, Robert.
All right. I'll catch you on the other side.
All right.
Welcome back, everybody. We're happy to have Dr. Tom Ptak with us as our guest for this episode. Dr. Ptak is an assistant professor with the Department of Geography and Environmental Studies here at Texas State University, and he's actually a colleague of mine over in the department. He has a BS in geography from Macquarie University. Is that how you say that?
It's Macquarie, but that was a good try.
Macquarie, okay. Knew I was going to blow that. I meant to ask earlier how to say that. That does explain the accent. I was wondering what part of East Texas you were from, but yeah. Macquarie.
Macquarie, yes, it's Macquarie. In Sydney.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
He has an MA and PhD in geography at the University of Oregon and has research interests in energy transitions in society, climate change and sustainability, water resources and hydropower, and borders. So you can see why he would be such a perfect guest for us. So welcome to the show, Tom.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And you're relatively new in the department, right?
I am. I've made it through my first academic year and survived. Maybe, I don't know if I would say thrived, but let's just stick with survived at this stage.
Very good. Well, you, I of course saw your name when you joined the department, and then I'm a big fan of the conversation. I'm a news junkie, and the conversation is this neat deal where there are reporter type people, media type people that are working with academics to help bring the message of science and research and knowledge to the people. And I saw an article that you had put out, I think it was last fall, that was called The Average Person's Daily Choices Can Still Make a Big Difference in Fighting Climate Change and Getting Governments and Utilities to Tackle It Too. And so riffing off that title, climate change is such a big issue. After all, it's global. What can an average person do? What's a brutal summary of your article for the conversation?
Yeah, well, an average person, and I'll put myself in this category for sure. I'm very average. We can do a lot. The problem is, or one of the challenges is that many people feel that really disempowered around climate issues and also really overwhelmed. It's truly global. This is, the purview of national governments and, the sort of the climate agreements, and they really feel that their individual contributions cannot have a meaningful impact. So collectively, I truly believe, and I think the data is there to demonstrate that is not true. First and foremost, everyone lives somewhere that has local issues, and most cities in this country have some sort of climate or sustainability initiative and programs. The city of San Marcos, for example, has a great sustainability initiative, whole, food, water, energy, community gardens, transportation. So folks can sort of just look in their local area and look at what their sort of local planning agencies are doing, and find something that speaks to them and start to either get involved or develop a sort of more comprehensive understanding of maybe how this plays out in a local area. We can all make decisions about things like what we do on a daily basis. For example, what we choose to eat or not. Food has a huge impact on carbon emissions. And no one is forcing anyone to eat meat or any type of food that comes a long way to get to your table. So we can make individual consumptive choices based on the sort of carbon intensity of various foods. We can think about engaging in fun initiatives like vertical farming in your house or in your apartment. Setting up a hydroponic system to grow lettuce or other sort of just fun, things that, can actually have quite an impact. My passion and my research interests are around energy. So we can really be very conscious about the type of energy practices that we use. Simple things like passive heating or cooling, especially, in Texas, closing your blinds early in the morning, and if you leave the house, turning your thermostat up, or buying a smart meter and doing it remotely can have a major impact on the energy grid, for example. And, I do this little exercise with students. We think about, Texas and the grid and the major grid failure a couple of years ago. They feel that their individual sort of contributions may not, have a large impact. And then we question them, hey, if that's true, then when it's really hot, why do you receive messages from your utility telling you, end users, to sort of turn your thermostats down, right? Mm-hmm. All of us can become politically active. And that doesn't mean, being an activist, but, writing to your local representative, telling them that climate change is important, and being involved in sort of other ways. We can all ride a bike, we can all walk, we can all, not use single-use plastics. And all of these things have a major impact, and collectively, they have a huge impact. We just have to really sort of believe that they do and sort of feel empowered about, our contributions.
I think, that the food aspect, just to build on that, is if you eat a climate-friendly diet, it's actually healthier overall. But it does cause me concerns about tacos, how climate-friendly.
Well, you could have a locally sourced taco. I mean, it's all about, where are the components of what you're eating coming from? Are the beans coming from Brazil, or are they coming from somewhere, in Texas, and the flour and the corn? And if it's a vegetarian taco or a meat taco, maybe this is your calling. You could have a sort of carbon-free taco.
I like it.
What about a carbon-negative taco?
Well, I noticed your article talks a lot about the disconnect that people have, and that sort of feeling that they're not really connected to the problem. And I wonder how much you think that disinformation plays into that. And I noticed this week that Pinterest was the first social media platform to say they're not going to allow any climate denying information on their platform. And I just wonder, what are your thoughts about that and the role that disinformation's playing?
Yeah, this is obviously a major impact. And, being a professor at a university and working with college-age students, one of the things that we spend a lot of time doing is trying to discern, what is legitimate, what is not legitimate. And that is, these are either ends of a sort of polarized scale. And a lot of the challenge with climate change is that so much of this is so complex, and so much of this is really nuanced. And the reporting about skepticism is pretty sophisticated. There are, some very compelling arguments that climate change is part of, these sort of super cycles of Earth heating and cooling. And there are some pretty sophisticated operations that put together these messages, right? And as scientists, we know that, maybe they are very likely cherry picking one piece of data from a large data set and manipulating that for a purpose. We can identify that as scientists and professionals. Students can get there, some of them very quickly, some of them with some help, and we can work through that in class and on research projects. But for a lot of folks that aren't in this space, I do believe strongly that it is a lot harder to make that distinction between, what is human-induced climate change and what is naturally occurring. And, we are seeing that these are massively funded disinformation campaigns. And, let's just call it what it is, big oil and the sort of coal lobby and other sort of actors that would make sense are often, directly involved in funding these types of campaigns or supporting them in other ways. We're starting to see a shift here, and I believe that it won't be long before it's harder and harder for these folks to sort of communicate this message.
Yeah, I've often felt that scientists are clearly at a disadvantage. One, if you are intent on speaking truthfully versus against somebody who isn't intent on speaking truthfully, you're going to lose. And you mentioned the finances and the money that's used to lobby. And the way I describe it, it's like being a scientist in this realm is like showing up to a knife fight with nothing but a pocket protector on. I mean, it's like you're gonna get mauled. But in the end, science ultimately wins. There's if you look at the link between cigarettes and cancer as an example of, but unfortunately, it takes time. And people become convinced.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I wanted to kind of go back to the like an individual, an average person response, and your column was mostly focused on actions on the emissions side. And then we're of course at the Meadow Center wrapped up around water aspects, but there's also a lot of things that people can do on the water side of things as well. Have you thought about that at all, or you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, I do. I don't see, obviously the Meadow Center is very focused on water. But I don't see climate change as, like here is the water side, here is the energy side, here is the food side, here is you cannot parcel out one of these areas and look at them individually, because, you cannot make energy without water. You cannot make food without, like, water is so integral to all of these dimensions. And we definitely need a more holistic, nuanced, integrated sort of approach to understanding climate change. And it's really hard because we're all sort of, considered experts in these specific areas. And we need to sort of move towards a more interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary focus. So in saying that, yes, I have some ideas. Well, one of them is more integrative research and more of a focus on water, but not just about water, for its relationships to all of these other parts. In terms of, like what individuals can do around water, I would sort of start to think about things like resiliency. And here I would consider what other places have done and other sort of water poor places that have had to be really smart around water. One of them might be Australia. And it's a place that I grew up and it's, although I've spent almost as much of my life outside of Australia as living in Australia. But one very, very simple thing, we always had a rainwater tank. Everyone had one. Everyone that I knew had one, no matter where you lived. Rainwater harvesting and storage of rainwater. And I can't say I've seen a rainwater tank in the United States. And to me, that's really counterintuitive, because especially in a place like Texas, my brief amount of research tells me that it is indeed legal here. I know in some states it's illegal, which let's just leave that right there. But I would think, just going back to the individual scale, rainwater harvesting and storage would be something that I would, encourage people to consider, because then you can, like, you have availability if you need to grow food. Then if we have another grid failure, you might have, access to water.
You'll be happy to hear I've got an Australian built, designed and constructed rainwater tank in our backyard here in Austin, 5,000 gallons. And we'll have to have you come out to the Meadow Center, because we have a couple rainwater tanks out there. Wish we had more, and I would agree with you 100%. It would be awesome if more people did rainwater harvesting. We do seem to be seeing more and more of it, particularly in Central Texas, and we're seeing more kind of urban building scale type rainwater harvesting systems at, like, office buildings. The Austin main library that's on Lady Bird Lake is there as well, or has a massive rainwater storage. And of course, with air conditioning, we also have a lot of air conditioning condensate.
Yeah. It just made me think when you said, how there are some places where there are policies against rainwater collection. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about political action, because your article, one of the things I really enjoyed about your article was, we all know about the thermostat and but I think a lot of us, like you mentioned, think, climate change is getting resolved at the UN or through international diplomacy. And one of the things we're seeing is that cities are really driving some of the biggest changes. And I'd love for you to tell us more about how, normal people like you and me can be a part of that, and how that really has an impact.
This is a social movement. And this is, if you want to feel empowered about climate change, look at all of the work that is happening, at cities across the United States who have made pledges to go 100% carbon neutral. and invest in renewable energy and invest in sort of smart transportation programs and all of these other things. It is happening. And it's actually people organizing that are bringing their concerns to, their sort of representatives who serve, the role of a representative is to serve their constituents, right? So you getting politically active, writing to representatives and being involved in some sort of group that's doing that at any sort of scale is it's a mechanism to move things in the right direction. And if folks do feel disempowered, the folks that take my global environmental change class don't feel disempowered by the end of it, because we've gone through all of these examples of where citizen action has resulted in, some of these amazing initiatives. I think, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but maybe, there's potentially, I think, 100 million Americans living in counties that have made climate pledges. I think, a huge number.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, if we want to look at the data and let the data speak, obviously some places are a lot further down the road than others, but there is a groundswell of movement, and it's cities, it's states, corporations or companies that are responding to, people that buy their products or use their services, telling them that they care about this and they should, go carbon neutral or carbon negative even. Just think about, what Greta Thunberg has, one person that decided to walk out of school and have a climate protest. That was the impetus for one of the largest environmental movements in history. So I'm an optimist here, and an optimist based on what I'm seeing in front of me.
Well, thank goodness for that, because I think, like you said, people really do want to do something, and it's really helpful to articulate what those things might be, because it is overwhelming.
Yeah. And it's going to be different for different people. Some folks are interested in transportation, some folks are interested in sort of community gardens, and some folks are interested in energy. And, there is a whole role for art as well. I've been working with this non-profit land art generator initiative that's looking at, doing all of this amazing, really innovative work with the built environment and like public spaces, and using, these sort of solar energy murals, and all of this just really incredible creative stuff. And it's sort of, this is going to take everyone with all of their skills, whatever they are, to develop these really holistic solutions. But the good news is that they're all local, because we all live somewhere and we can all do something in our sort of, local community.
I love your comment earlier about if it didn't matter what you were doing, you wouldn't be getting those messages from the utility company. And I think that's such an empowering way to think about it, that all these little things do add up. They matter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting you've come to Texas, because this is a place that is on balance pretty conservative. Texas legislature doesn't really discuss climate change. I think on one side of the aisle is pretty much against it, and the other side of the aisle generally, they believe in it and want to do something about it, but they also recognize it's pretty futile with the current political power to do anything, and so it becomes something of a waste of time given the limited session that we have. And I don't know what things were like up in Oregon, but and I don't know what you're focusing on research right now. And so, you're planning or hoping or doing something in Texas, and what does your research portfolio right now, or even, what are you hoping to accomplish in the future?
What am I hoping to accomplish? Something that is just not confined to the ivory tower of academia, something that actually has a real impact and mostly, unfortunately, with climate change, we know that it disproportionately affects members of society that are already marginalized. And, I really hope that my work can sort of serve underserved communities or segments of the population that are, really, either left out in the cold when the grid fails, or on the front lines of sort of these, heat waves. So where my research is going, I could call it these sort of meta-scale sort of disturbances to the grid. We are looking at a national scale, what are things that either reactively shut off electricity to certain parts of the country, like the winter storm in Texas, or in the west coast of the United States, we're seeing more and more with the wildfires every summer, these policies that started in California called public safety power shutoffs, where the utilities have these red flag weather events, high wind, so they just black out these large parts of the grid because they don't want sort of arcs from the power lines going into the vegetation and starting fires. What that does is leave groups that are already vulnerable even more vulnerable, because you don't have communications and you may be reliant on electricity for ventilators or other medical equipment or your medicine. So what we're trying to do is get a handle on, is there any sort of spatial pattern to these disturbances? Is there a particular sort of something that's driving these disturbances? And then I'm looking at what are some possible solutions? I'll take it back to the water here. And there is something called irrigation modernization. Okay, you might be familiar with it, Robert. Mm-hmm. But basically in, especially the Western United States, I think up to about 80% of water withdrawals are for irrigated agriculture. Most of the infrastructure around that irrigation are just sort of open canals, okay? You lose a lot to, seepage and evaporation. Mm-hmm. So modernizing is enclosing the canal, piping the canal, pressurizing the canal, and then what you can do there, and you can drop these sort of micro turbines, hydropower turbines, into the pipes, because you just need water to spin a turbine.
Yep.
What you have then is you have pressurized water. So if you do have a wildfire, you have pressurized water on hand so that suppression, rather than just sort of drawing out of an open canal, which takes a lot more time to fill up a fire truck, you've got pressurized water. Could be the difference between life and death. And we saw this in Medford, Oregon, a couple of years ago. This exact scenario happened, okay? You can also develop microgrids. So instead of, having to have these pumps that pump the water out of the river up onto the irrigated land, you've got these little turbines, and you can do sort of grid islanding and have these little microgrids here, okay? So that's one possible. So as a social scientist, I've been engaged in this, research that looking at, okay, well, all the technical side checks out, but what are the sort of, social complexities that may sort of get in the way of getting these projects in the ground? On another scale, looking in, wildfires used to be confined to the the wildlands, the mountains, the forests, and then it was the sort of, the urban interface. What we saw in Colorado, in Boulder, just at the end of last year, was that this was a fire event that just raised an urban area. Okay, and very quickly, what happened is that the winds were so high. A strip mall burnt down, basically. How is this possible? The winds were so high that they carried the sparks and basically blew hot sparks up into these structures until the sparks found their way in through holes and then started to burn the framing. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So nowhere is really the bad news is the areas that we sort of felt maybe were immune to these impacts of climate change are no longer immune. So again, if this happens and a utility decides to shut off the electricity and everyone's without communication, what are some things that we might, what is some energy part of an energy transition that could be used as a resiliency strategy? You could develop something like community solar and storage. So, a small solar operation that is sort of either partly owned or the purview of some community, loosely defined. And you might pair that with battery so that, when the grid is either preemptively shut off or goes off because a tree falls through the power lines and there's a fire and it just everything goes off, the community still has electricity. And trying to figure out the social complexities, target, maybe communities at need, and where it might make either economic, political, or other sort of sense to site these types of installations. That's a very long answer about what I'm trying to do with my research.
So I can't help myself, but it almost sounds like creating little enclaves that can kind of shut themselves off for the grid. So it kind of sounds like a Mad Max kind of future of it. But I hear what you're saying. It's like because even in the water world, there's this decentralized concept of the way you build resiliency is being able to do your own thing.
Sure.
And not having to rely on a broader distribution network in order to get your supplies. But I hear what you're saying. My wife's pretty intent on us getting a generator, based on the trauma of what happened with Winter Storm Uri, but we're also fortunate and privileged to be able to afford to do something like that. And even then, we would still be relying on the natural gas being delivered to continue to power our house.
I would think about, you might be able to get a micro turbine. I would say solar and storage is also, coming down in price, and you get, the tax credits there. There's a whole range of different technologies that you could sort of use to sort of bolster your sort of household sort of resiliency.
Well, you ended your article in the conversation, which y'all can search. Just Google the conversation, and then probably just Ptak, Ptak, to read the article. But you end the article with a great quote. It's one of my favorites from Bill McKibben. There are no silver bullets, only silver buckshot. There isn't a single solution. It's the same for power. It's the same for water. So, well, want to thank you for being with us and sharing your thoughts. Welcome to Texas. You're fortunate you missed Winter Storm Uri, but you're feeling the full brunt of Texas now. With what are we supposed to be? 106 today, maybe 107 tomorrow.
Let's just say with 100. Let's just go with 104. 104 degrees Fahrenheit.
Fahrenheit, yes. But thank you so much for being on the show, and I know we're looking forward to and hoping that we can collaborate in the future. I think there's a lot of similarities of goals and as you said, water and power and tacos all work together, and so we should do that.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Tom.
Of course. Of course.
Wow. I'm so excited that we got someone like that recruited to Texas State. It's just a game changer.
Yeah,
Really.
me too. I was happy to see that someone new with climate experience was brought in, and then seeing that article in the conversation
So cool.
just told me also that he has a desire to communicate science with the people.
Yeah.
Share that message, and as he said in his interview, have a greater impact.
Did
So
that get
just,
the leads
wonderful.
put in about how maybe he could tie into some of the work we're trying to do?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of commonality there in terms of goals, and interests in working with the public. There's his kind of discussion of using, kind of looking at geographic variations, and also I know, and I've heard him speak of this before, of disadvantaged communities.
Yeah.
I think he might be able to help us out there, and then as he correctly noted, we do tend to silo a little bit. And here's water, here's power, here's food, but there's also the energy water nexus, or what I hear from a lot of our A&M friends, the energy water food nexus, and he's absolutely right that there aren't these firm silos, and we do need to communicate across them. So yeah, I think there's going to be some neat opportunities there for us to work together and pursue some common goals.
Yeah, and I'm going to invite him to the rainwater revival in the Hill Country for sure.
Oh, yeah. I thought it was an odd comment, but then I'm like, if you drive around San Marcos, I don't know that you see a whole lot of evidence of rainwater harvesting, but and then I'm also tuned in to see, like, when you're aware of it, you
Right.
start seeing it all over the place. But yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, but our friends that are living off of wells, they have a bit of a different reality, and I think there's a little more motivation to collect rainwater and have that resilience. They know all too well how hard these summers can be. So
Right. I think he'll be happy to hear that Central Texas in particular is a leader, not only in the state, but in the country for rainwater harvesting. But he's also right in that there really should be a lot more of it. Back when Wendy, my wife, and I watched a lot of HGTV, International House Hunters was one of our shows, and the ones in Australia were my favorite because they always talked about the rainwater harvesting system. But they got pretty progressive about rainwater harvesting during that decade-long drought that they had, and so
coming
they make
to
some
a
very
town near you, right, Robert?
Say that. What's that?
Coming to a town near you.
Yeah. Our rainwater tank. I mean, we're in something of a drought right now, and our rainwater tank is nearly full, and available, to meet our outdoor needs without using any city water. So, highly recommend it. But it is also one of those things where, to do a big amount of storage, you got to have some money to do it, and some property to do it on. But because our tank, 5,000 gallons, is 11-foot diameter by I think 6 or 7 feet tall. But it's a beautiful tank. Those Australians know how to build a beautiful rainwater tank.
Well, I think we should ask him for a cultural exchange. And
okay.
We'll take him to Dripping Springs, and he can take us to Sydney.
Okay. Yeah, that's a fair trade.
I think so. Well, tell me what good news you saw while you were out learning.
So the good news that I saw is related in part to my activity on Austin Water Forward Task Force. that worked with the city of Austin in developing a 100-year water plan that factored in climate change. And part of that plan was rainwater harvesting, condensate harvesting, but then also a much more reuse, and also a promotion of building scale on-site water reuse. And so I was honored to be at the ribbon cutting. I got to hold one end of the ribbon.
Wow.
Jennifer Walker held the other one. But at the ribbon cutting for Oscar and Clara. And so Oscar stands for On-Site Collection and Reuse, which is basically a fancy name for two 20,000-gallon tanks that's buried in the courtyard of a new permitting building that Austin has up at the old Highland Mall. And so it's collecting rainwater off the roof and air conditioning condensate, and then they use it for irrigating the landscaping. And then Clara, besides being the name of one of my favorite kitties here at home, stands for Closed Loop Advanced Reclaim Assembly. And this is the really cool part. Now, rainwater harvesting, all that's cool. We've been doing that for quite a while, and it's cool to see it going in. But Clara is special, and Clara is an on-site kind of skid-based wastewater treatment plant building scale system. And so it takes everything that goes down the drains, the toilets, the urinals. It's treating it on site and then bringing it back into the building to flush the urinals and the toilets. And so the combination of Oscar and Clara reduces the building, or is expected to reduce the building's potable water use by up to 75%. And so, excuse me, I'll cut this out. Having a coughing fit. Don't drink it, whatever you do. Now I'm trying to think what I was going to say.
You're talking about Clara, but I don't remember exactly
Clara.
Stopped.
But
Watering irrigating the landscape.
Well, I'll start here. I know where I was. So Clara is a demonstration project to show others how it can be done. And it's the first of its kind in Texas, and reportedly the third of its kind in the United States. And it's also open to the public. So you can go check it out if you'd like. It's in the building complex across from Vivo's over on I-35. Is the best way I can explain it. And there's a parking garage, and then there's a new building, and in between is a nice courtyard. And it's been beautifully landscaped, and so it brackets in these two shipping container-looking buildings. And you can kind of peer in and look at the control panel, and then it has a little catwalk that you can walk over the top, and you can see how they're using like hydroponics to treat the water. We were getting an official tour, and two of the plants looked like they were marijuana plants. And so I asked the tour guy, I said, "What are y'all growing? It looks like you're growing pot on that roof." And he got real concerned because he was like looking. And he goes, "I don't know what that is." But anyways, they're using plants for denitrification of the supply. And one thing that's remarkable is like how simple it appears to be. The treatment process it appears to be. There's some filtering of the chunks up front, and then there's this denitrification. They do this anoxic type stuff, and then there's finally some filtration, ultraviolet, and then it goes back into the building. And I do have to confess, I made a donation to the system before I left. So I think this is in part a kind of a future building resiliency because of climate change impacts on water resources. And then something I hadn't thought about before that the city pointed out is that using rainwater and air conditioning condensate, because that water is already pretty clean, saves treatment costs, which saves power costs, which also has a benefit to the climate. So just all in all, really, really cool project. And I don't know why water reuse plants make me so happy, but I mean, I was just elated. I was walking on a cloud, just a big smile, just so happy to see this project come to fruition and be activated.
Well, congratulations to you and the task force, because I know y'all have been advocating for that for a long time. It's really
Yeah,
cool.
it's amazing. You should go check it out, Carrie. I think
I
you might
will.
like
It's
it.
actually in my neighborhood, so I will definitely go check
You
it
should
out.
go check it out. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know when I might do that, Robert?
When?
Well, I'm going to propose that I use my day off to go do that, because
Okay.
my article is about going to a 4-day work week.
Nice setup.
I know, right? So smooth, so smooth. This article comes out of Fast Company, and I don't know if y'all listening, Robert, if you heard, but the UK started piloting a 32-hour work week. I
I did hear about that. Yeah.
think it was this week they started, which is June. It's June 10th right now. So this is just talking about the 32-hour work week, which a lot of people have put forward just for kind of productivity reasons and mental health and work-life balance. But it turns out it has a massive impact on cutting emissions. And in the UK, which it would be is a very conservative number compared to what it would be in the United States, because they actually use a lot of public transit already. But the estimated impact is that it's going to remove 20% of their emissions by going to a 32-hour work week. And like I said, that would be a much bigger number here if we were to do it, because we have a lot more individual car traffic. And I think we have 3/4 of commuters drive by themselves in the United States versus, I think, 20% over there or something like that. So they just kind of talk about how, intuitive. We saw during the pandemic people working from home, and there were all kinds of savings, and cities that usually have smog no longer had smog. And there were some of these observational things. But the reason that hybrid work is not as ideal is that when you let folks work different hours across a 5-day week, you're still keeping the lights on at the office for 5 days. And then folks are also keeping their lights on at home, working at home. And so you actually increase your footprint in some ways. You do keep cars off the road, but you aren't saving as much as you can by just cutting off one of the days altogether and making it a non-operational day at the office. And so they're saying that closing that day really is key, because it dials back consumption of energy, pulls back the emissions from the car travel, and this makes people happier. And the idea is that maybe if they're home one more day of the week, they'll use that time to kind of be with their family, go visit parks, be more on foot, so it kind of just contributes to the overall healthier planet, healthier lifestyle. So I say we get started on this ASAP, Robert.
Right, well, I will take that under consideration.
Yeah, good. Well, Spain and Scotland are next. They've already got a pilot scheduled. So I think, why not Meadow Center?
All right. Well, I expect the memo on Monday. So making your best argument.
Okay, well, I read it on the internet, so
it must be true.
I know.
Yeah, boy, it would be wonderful. Golly, the weekend just seems to go by too quick, doesn't it?
I know, but it is cool. I think, like we've been talking about the whole episode, it's taking some creativity. We've got to accept the reality and figure out how we can make changes. And so it's a creative idea, and I'm really glad people are trying it out, testing it out.
Awesome. Well, I wonder if those cows and sheep in New Zealand, if we could just move them to a 4-day work week instead
I
of
wish they would
5.
take a day off. Yeah.
Yeah, that might help too. All right, Carrie. Well, thank you so much. Always a joy
Absolutely.
to do this with you, and everybody tune in next time for more climate change tidbits and another guest. So, everybody, what are the lessons here? If you want to feel at home, you can move to Illinois where there's armadillos. Make sure you're taking your Beano. What lessons do you have, Carrie?
Get your sleep while you can.
Oh yeah, get your sleep while you can.
Start collecting some rainwater and turn down your thermostats.
There we go.
All right, and vote.
All right, y'all. Stay cool, everybody.
Stay cool. Bye.
Bye-bye.
But